In this video, I'm going to be talking about the sovereignty of God. I'm going to be talking about the things that God established in order for us to understand other things. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm going to read in Isaiah 45. I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. You heavens above, rain down righteousness. Let the clouds shower it down. Let the earth open wide. Let salvation spring up. Let righteousness grow with it. I, the Lord, have created it. Let me read the first sentence again. I form the light and create the darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. Did God create evil? Yes, God created evil. Did God create light and create darkness? The Lord has done all these things. Again, people always get upset when I'm talking about certain things that the Lord established. He established slavery. He established rape. And people got upset about this because I said this in a video, and I'm not going to stop saying that the Lord is sovereign over everything and that He is the one who has created light and darkness. He has established these things in order for us to understand. And if you want to drop off the channel, feel free. If you cannot handle understanding what it is that I'm saying, if you cannot handle understanding what it is that God established and why He did it, because you want to draw up your own narrative, feel free to leave. Because this is not a channel for counterfeit Christianity. This is not a channel where I am going to mince things or I'm going to distort what God has done in order to help you to believe in a delusion, to believe what you want to believe because you refuse to rend your heart to the truth. God did establish these things. Some of them are terrible. And you know what? Handing yourself over to the devil is terrible. It is going to yield terrible results. If God is only in charge of the good, and that's all He's doing, is making sure that things are good, how will you ever understand that you need to avoid at all cost evil? That you will be punished and handed over to Satan when you choose him. What I am not saying is that God has established terrible things and then called them good. I'm not saying that in the least. But what I am saying is that God is sovereign over everything, that He has established certain things in order for us to understand slavery to the devil, bondage, punishment, and what will happen if we choose evil. Zechariah 14. A day of the Lord is coming, Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women raped. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Okay, listen. This is talking about when the Lord comes and reigns. A day of the Lord is coming, Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. Who's doing that? I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. God would do that? God would do such a thing? The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women raped. Who's doing it? God is doing it. Who established these terrible things? God established them. Did He establish them to say that they are good? No, He didn't establish them to say that they are good. He established them to help you understand what happens when you choose evil, when you choose to be defiled by what is evil. Does He not also refer to your women being defiled when talking about rape? No, God has not established this to say that it's good, but God has established it to help you understand. And I understand that a lot of people on this channel might be triggered by that. You need to go and bring it to God. I understand that people on this channel have had all kinds of abuse happen to them. I have too. But I can talk about this because I know my God. Because I know that anything that He has established in order to teach. And so I can lean into the lesson and also know that He will give me vindication. He will give me justice. And that God did not establish this in order to hurt me. His plans for me are good. even if I am hurt in the process. I've told you in other videos, you know my story, you know some of the things that I have been through in my life and in my childhood. And you also know that God has used it for good. He has used it in order to teach me. He established a situation in which my father used us in order to destroy my mother, in which my father used and exploited us for his own needs. Continuously, in every situation, every interaction, the only reason he had to interact with us was if there was something in it for him. And if there wasn't, he didn't care. He didn't care anything about us. He always had us doing something for him. If there wasn't something that we could directly do for him, he threw us out into the yard to go work his yard. Do you understand what God taught me there? Do you understand the sin and the pain that that led to in my life? The idolatry that it led to in my life of me choosing men who treated me similarly. And that God wanted me to know what happens when I choose my enemy. That God wanted me to know what happens when the devil is working through us in order to get to him, and that he could care less about us, that he has no loyalty to us, that all of the promises that he has made to us through the world, he does not intend to fulfill. He intends to destroy us, and he intends to use and exploit us in order to get to our Father. Do you understand that God established something in my life that was terrible, but he established it for my good, so that I could ultimately understand and not choose my enemy? Do not misunderstand or distort what I'm saying. And if you have issues with this, you need to go deal with your issues, because what I am talking about is the sovereignty of God. When I talk about God establishing slavery, and he established treatment, good treatment of slaves, but he also made a distinction between slaves who are foreigners, who are not in him, who are not his people, and slaves who are not to be treated as slaves if they are a fellow Israelite, but are to be treated as a hired worker. Is this because he hates the other people he created? No. It's because he's establishing something so that we can understand that when you are in him, you are treated differently. You are treated as a co-laborer. You are given an opportunity to be engrafted into his family. And when the world distorted that through Catholicism, when Satan distorted slavery through Catholicism and established the most evil version of how to treat a slave, that's not what God, his people, is it? He didn't teach his people to treat slaves in the way that Catholicism established treating slaves through the transatlantic slave trade. Not the same thing, and yet God established it. He allowed that to happen. He sent that. Why did he send it? Because he wants you to know what it is to be a slave to the devil. It's terrible. But why are you not willing to talk about these things if God himself established it? Why is there anything that you're not willing to talk about, that you're not willing to consider and wrap your heart around what God is doing? You realize that if you can't do this with things that have not personally affected you, how will you do it with the things that have personally affected you? How are you ever going to receive God's ministry and understand what he is doing in your experiences if you are unwilling to consider that he's sovereign? If you are unwilling to consider that he is the one who has had a plan in all of this. If you can't do that, you will not receive his ministry. You will hide out because you will not be able to reconcile what you think is good with what God knows is good. There's an issue going on in my family right now with regard to a life. And I'm praying and I'm wanting to know what's going to happen. I'm looking at my phone and I'm waiting to see what's going to be done. What is he going to do? And I was finding myself praying, please God, do this already. Do this already. The torture of not knowing whether they're going to live or die. I can't take it. Just do this already. Let us know. And he's not speeding up the process for me or anyone else who's praying that prayer. Why? Because there's something that he's doing right now. He's building each one of the people who are praying and fasting right now, who have been affected by this, who have joined in covering my family right now because he's doing something. So I had to step back and realize that I don't get to be selfish. I don't get to put my own spin on what I think is good. He might be sparing this life from being here during the Antichrist reign. Maybe that's what he thinks is good or knows is good. What I want is not necessarily good. I have to orient my heart around what he knows is good, and what he knows is good might be that that life does not remain, that I trust him and not medicine, that we're not going to medicine to say whether this life is going to live or die, because only God gives life and only God takes life. You cannot rely on your own understanding. If I tell you that God established these things, and you see in the Bible that he says, I created it all, darkness and light, evil and good, you have to reconcile that. You have to wrap your heart around what is true, not around what is comfortable for you. And you saw in Zechariah that he handed people over for these things to happen. Why would God do that? He handed women over to be raped in this situation. Why would he do that? Because we know that he knows what is good. We know his plans are good for us. Why would he do that? Because we are handed over for the destruction of the flesh, that we might be saved on the last day. Even in doing those things, giving Jerusalem their due punishment, he's doing something. If you're handed over for destruction, you are finally going to be brought to your knees to understand what you've chosen, who you've been, and you're going to have to reach out to God. That might just be what needs to happen in order for you to reach back when he reaches out to you, in order for you to understand that you need him, in order for you to understand who you've been. I'm not going to mince words, and I'm not going to change the message. I don't know how many times I can say that. So if you can't handle it, you have some decisions to make. I am not saying that these things are good. I am saying that God's plans are good. He knows what he's doing in all of these things. God created evil, but he didn't call it good. You need to understand the difference. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.